Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hey, good
Hi.
morning.
Good morning, good morning, good
Good
morning
morning.
to all of you. Thank you guys so much for joining us. For those that are coming back from our break, I want to thank you for coming back. I want to thank you guys for even participating and gaining the knowledge from these three awesome speakers. And I want to take a quick second to thank Renata and her team. Number one, for having the foresight to bring these powerful individuals into our space to let us be able to see what really can be done in our cities. I also want to thank Renata and her team for allowing the speakers to genuinely share their experiences, because now I feel like never before your presentations helped us to see what should be done, what can be done, and after today, what will be done in our city. Wilmington is a little different than other cities, which I'm sure those that are watching understand the dynamics of our city. But if what I can say about all three of your presentations is that you made it really plain and clear and concise about the possibilities for what can happen here in our city of Wilmington. So before I jump into the questions, I wanted to thank Renata for bringing you here. And I wanted to really take the time to thank all three of you for your transparency and willingness to even impart into our city. And trust me, we're not going to just listen to you and then walk away. We are really going to listen to you and implement. So if your phones start ringing, thank you. So before we get started with the questions, the people that are viewing, you can submit questions via the chat. And please get involved. There's nothing like having these powerful people in your space and you walk away with questions. This is our chance to get some detailed information, to get insight that maybe wasn't covered while they were talking. So take advantage of this. We do have some questions I'm going to be asking, and then we're going to be looking to the audience for their questions. So do not feel like any question, is not right to ask. We need to get all of our questions answered. So before we get started, we have questions for you to answer as a group, and then I have some questions for each speaker. So I'm going to jump right in. So a common theme throughout all of your talks today was the ever-increasing racial wealth gap devaluation of Black-owned homes and Black-owned businesses. What practical systemic changes have you seen in other cities or even in your own that have started to narrow that racial wealth gap?
For me, I actually see lots of activities in cities all across the country. We see in Detroit people trying new home ownership models by essentially having philanthropy serve as a role of a bank and using new credit scoring systems. You see lots of efforts in and around Chicago doing the same thing, creating new zoning ordinances and MSP in Minneapolis. I also see many different enterprise zone type things where they're zoning for inclusive and businesses in an area, and to zone in ways that will incubate businesses all across the country. The problem with all of these is that they're just not at a scale that is making significant waves. Every city I go to, there are people doing big things, but they're not getting big investment. And that's the real issue. So we're not wanting for innovation as much as we don't see the investment capital that goes towards these endeavors.
And I'd love to add that, that's happening, as Andres just said, all over the nation. And the investment that I see comes really at a small level, and government is actually the folks who are taking some of the more innovative, the more innovative steps. For example, in Maryland, I know Tacoma Park has a affordable home ownership initiative. Now, we hear about affordable housing all day long, right? But the truth is, affordable housing equals rental housing. It's not a conversation about wealth creation. It's not a conversation about, mobility for those families. It's just affordable housing. And what they've done is actually, knowing that their housing stock is, astronomical, they're right in the DC area. What they've done is the city council, so we're talking a city of 18,000 people. The city council has decided to put 200,000 down on projects just to bring the cost down of a house, partner with a affordable home ownership partner, which is in that area, their partner is Habitat for Humanity, so that they can not only offer this house at a lower price point on the market, but it's a perpetual affordable homeownership opportunity. And similarly with businesses, what I see, for example, in the DC area, is the conversation around affordable business ownership, or at least affordable business leasing. So in these large projects that have been city deemed, there's set asides for small businesses to actually locate in prime storefront locations. So I see it happening, just as Andre said, on a smaller scale. And folks believe that government is,
Mhm.
slow and not necessarily moving fast, but some of those economic development quasi organizations, similar to Wilmington Alliance, they partner with the local government and help them bring that kind of innovative thinking to fruition. The investment, on another hand, is just not there in a bigger way.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is this. Um, there's been this discussion around wealth creation and closing the racial wealth gap, and I think to have that discussion and not focus on ways of racial justice, and not focus on racial wealth gap closing, and not focus on business ownership and
Mhm.
property ownership. Wealth is created by owning assets that generate recurring revenue and appreciate over time. Now, keep that hit me like a ton of rocks about a year ago. That if we really are trying to close the racial wealth gap, we got to help more people of color own assets that generate revenues, businesses, homes, as well as commercial real estate that generate revenue on a recurring basis and appreciate over time. And I'm really excited about. We launched this community crowdfunding campaign in Baltimore, where we allowed we provided an opportunity for local, small, Black, and impact investors in general to co-own a shopping center, right?
Mhm.
And there was a positive news article on a Saturday, and by Monday, over 133 people with $1,000 or $2,000 invested in the ownership, right? And so we now have 3 or 4 opportunities where, people typically would patronize a local community shopping plaza, but didn't own it. Thought of, can you help more people of color own commercial property
Mhm.
and own businesses? Is something that, and then to talk about it in a way that's unapologetic around helping more Black people own commercial property, and helping more people of color own businesses. That's something that's really exciting, and helping them get early capital as well.
So,
Can I just briefly add
yeah,
to that?
sure,
Because
please do.
people have a false understanding about what wealth is, and when we are talking about wealth, we certainly want people to live a lifestyle of the rich and famous, but it's really not that. It's
Mhm.
really about having the protection to weather the inevitable economic shocks that will come. So if there's a COVID, if it's a Hurricane Katrina, if it's a whatever is coming your way, if you have wealth, you can lean on home equity, you can lean on a 401k, you can lean on savings that come from a business. And so it's not to say that I want people to be rich, but that's not the point. The point is I want people to have protection, because we're not protected. And to be clear, there's a lot of people, middle class Black folk, who have incomes, high income, but not wealth. And
Mhm.
so another aspect of this, there's only generally two sides of the wealth equation. I mean, there's the assets and debt. And so we do need debt cancellation. When you look at Black people in particular, where our wealth is, it's tied up largely in the home ownership and businesses. People who have wealth, that's primarily the two areas. and I need to make a note, we're under indexed in 401ks, the stock market in general, all those other assets that can accrue wealth over time. But even wealthy people who have wealth, whose net worth is above zero, when you look at their debts, it's hospital debt,
Mhm.
student loan, student loans, another uncollateralized debt, the bad kind of debt. Not, remember, not all debt is bad. Like if you get a mortgage, that is a good thing. If you get a business loan, that is a good thing, because the assumption is you're going to make that and more over time. But I just wanted to say that, because when we talk about wealth, a lot of folks have Puff Daddy in their head, and it's not that. It is, I mean, that might be it, but it's more about protection. Knowing that you can go to work, come back, send your kids to school, and not worry that if something happens, you're going to have an absolute collapse.
That was a great point to make, and I appreciate you for interjecting that. On that same inequality of building wealth, there are conversations all the time, right, around like the inequalities, and they're usually an uncomfortable conversation to have. So, what do you say to a CEO or a business leader or even a government official that simply thinks that if a business fails, right, that they didn't try hard enough or have a solid business plan? Like, how do we have these conversations that we say that wasn't what really happened, and we need you to buy into what's really happening?
Oh, do you want to direct it to any?
All four of you. That's who wants to go.
I'm happy to jump in. So my background is that, I've been, a practitioner. I've worked for the government, for local government, for the feds, in this space. So I've had these hard conversations numerous times. First, I'm going to just be very clear: personality and bias is real. So, whatever hard conversation you're having, know who you're talking to and know where the opening is for a wedge of consciousness. The way I approach my wedge always comes in numbers. It comes in stats. So it doesn't have to be me. There are very intelligent people. We got two right here, Lanier and Andre. They're very intelligent people. We've got very intelligent organizations that have already done this work. So when I'm talking to, elected officials who may think, oh, their constituents won't agree with this, or a director of some politicized internal agency, and rest assured, the small business agencies are often very politicized in the government, locally, regionally, nationally. I really do lean on some of the stats. Organizations that I go to would be the Association for Enterprise Opportunity. That's aeoworks.org. Andre just put out an awesome book. I mean, like, this is the type of stuff that we need to be armed with, right? Like, we can't just go in with, heart on sleeve because you just look like a Black person advocating for Black people. But when you start talking about a person of color advocating for justice and fairness and equity, your conversation is different when you have the numbers, when you've done the research. So I would say know who you're talking to and do your research. Organizations left, right, and center are publishing this work. Authors are writing about this stuff. So that's how I approach higher ups, especially people who are struggling to justify doing the right thing.
Awesome, thank you. Lanier or Andre, do you want to
Yeah,
contribute?
the only thing I'd add to that, and I mentioned this a little bit in my remarks, is, this is a moment where we can ask and push people to brainstorm how we might do things differently, right? Call it innovation, call it systemic change. I mean, I think if we just spent time saying, all right, you see the inequality, you see the disparity in neighborhoods, the disparity in incomes. Let's just for a half an hour, I did this recently with a Chamber of Commerce. Let's just put on the board, what are 15 things we could do differently? Right? And again, inevitably, 10 of them people won't get behind, but there's typically 2 or 3 things people could say. Should we do more, pre-development funding? Should we do more, not only small business advisory work, but also, early capital that feels like equity, right? That's angel funds or other things of that sort, right? How do we, have our CDFI partners have more flexibility and in speed in terms of being able to provide capital? And again, the moment allows us to talk about it specifically as it relates to race, right? I think in prior years, we always had to say minority, or even now in the entrepreneur of color, sort of tagline. But I just want to say, look, if you really look at the problem, there's communities where there's less wealth, there's higher crime, there's more disparity. Those communities are typically Black or Latino. Let's go over there and focus on initiative and capital that will help more people of color own businesses and own commercial real estate that have the potential to grow.
Awesome.
What's interesting when I hear questions that you posed, that that the issue of a lack of growth is really a reflection of a lack of fitness. I have to remind many corporate execs how they actually stayed afloat. Let's be clear that, one, I mean, we've had past presidents who own businesses that went into bankruptcy several times and were bailed out. In addition, we just saw with this PPP loan fiasco that there were a number of white-led businesses that got support from government resources. And if we were honest, the reason why a higher proportion of white businesses survive is because they are subsidized by government entities at higher rates. And so in my presentation, I talked about our one study that we did where we scraped all the Yelp data. And what we found was in the United States, and we found that Black businesses score, Black, brown, and Asian businesses score as high on Yelp as their, if not higher, than their white counterparts, but they get less revenue because of the as the neighborhoods gets Black. Our elders used to say this all the time: our ice is just as cold. Our ice, because they knew that this was not about quality. This is about investment.
Mm-hmm.
And the lack of growth is really a reflection of a lack of investment. Nothing grows without investment. So if we want to see more businesses grow, we need to see greater investment. And if we really want to see investment go to quality, we would have much more investment in Black, brown, and Asian-led businesses.
Thank you. This next question is for all three of you again, but I would like Lanier to lead on this. Many neighborhoods and cities, such as Wilmington especially, we're in a cycle of poverty, and that poverty comes with violence. And so a lot of the communities do not trust when we say, hey, we're going to do a new program, we're here to help you. People have come to them and said that, and it doesn't quite work out like it's supposed to. So how do we build trust in our communities where they're not just looking at us as, hey, this is a new program that's not going to follow through, but hey, this is something that we're really going to execute on. And Lanier, specifically, when you talked about doing this shopping center as a crowd fund, how did you gain that belief in the community where people weren't saying, they're just going to take our money? We've heard these things before. So tell us about that process of building that level of trust to get that immediate type of response and buy-in.
Yeah, it's like most things that are clever sound overly simple, right? So I don't want to make this sound simple, but it's really, spending time and talking to people, right? So, when in my prior roles as head of economic development, and in my current roles as sort of leading community development initiatives, I spend a lot of time up front just talking to people, saying, what are you trying to do? What do you need? What's the resource you need? Why? Right? And the trust becomes, I was just saying, not saying no, not telling people that will never work, but really sort of narrowing in on what you believe can be investable, can actually get done. So people can have their dreams, and I'm not a dream killer. I always say I barely tell people that, their baby is ugly, rarely. But I always focus in on, you know what, that's something we could do. You really need this type of capital, or you really are trying to do this thing. So, I've in some of the community organizations, I've started to articulate it as, let's write together. I call it the help me help you memo, right? Let's write it together. What are you trying to do that I can understand, and then be able to advocate on your behalf to do what you think will do to help you, make you more successful. And again, the work of the Economic Development Organization is to really analyze first. I think that can get done. I think that makes sense. I can vouch for that. And then ultimately, to advocate.
Okay.
The more we do that, the more we start to communicate. Even in our Baltimore crowdfunding effort, we did probably, it was all Zoom, but probably 30 to 50 Zoom conversations with, 5 to 50 people on the line.
Okay.
It's saying, here's who we are, here's the mission, here's what the strategy is, here's what the numbers look like, and you just take all the questions. And, to do this work, you got to sort of go out there, chest open and ready, to spend the time to both inform, to build that trust, almost one person, one conversation, one event at a time.
Yeah. So as that project is going on, like you're going through the phases, and what are you doing strategically, maybe like on the transparency side, to keep that trust going full through the project? What are some of those strategies?
It's a great question, and we're early. So it's funny, when we raised our capital, I have, one of a family member who's a traditional venture capital guy. He says, well, congratulations, you got 133 Black, small, local impact investors. And then the second comment was, boy, I feel for you. How you gonna manage that, right? So
Managing it.
this question of, but that's part of the mission of the work, is how do you communicate? How do you explain, what the opportunities are, the business decisions that have to be made, to give people voice, to get a K1, what is a K1, right? To how you do the reporting, and how frequently. So we're grappling with all those issues now. You communicate with people once a month, once a quarter, twice a year, to what level of detail, how do you get people together in a way that the investors sort of know each other and all feel like they have some common alignment. But then also, how do you say, well, here's the decisions that, are generated based on keeping the project profitable. And here's this long-term perspective of how we strengthen neighborhoods and how we create wealth for each other. Again, all that has to lead with almost a heartfelt, I want to do this work. It's as much about the money as it's about the mission. It's about the relationship, and and again, getting into the weeds. If you're not willing to do that, this won't be fun work. But to the extent that you enjoy engaging, with people, and answering questions, and dealing with some of the unreasonable, requests as well, that's true urban community economic development work. And so I hope I know all the people on this call are passionate about it.
Awesome.
Can I just highlight one thing, and I'll be brief on this? What Lanier described, how I describe what Lanier just shared, is it's much easier to accomplish these goals when you're a member of a community.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't have to constantly build trust, and you don't if you are a member of a community. I mean, people are thirsting for opportunities like this. People are thirsting for it. That's not, we have people who will come to the table, but when it's somebody coming from the outside who that could be a used car salesman, that hasn't had any kind of track record, they're going to, rightfully so, you should be hesitant. But when you do the work of being a member of a community, a lot of these issues go away, because I actually think there's a misconception about trust in the hood. There's actually a lot of trust in the hood, but they've been burned
Yeah.
several times by charlatans and grifters.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's about finding the people who can connect. I mean, you mentioned my book. Also, really, I wrote my book in a way that people, you don't have to be a policy expert to understand. Like, and you don't, and oftentimes we use language to distance ourselves. And in this space, if you say capital stack, people are going to go, "What's that?" You really have to do a good job of explaining things in ways that people can hear. And that's not to say dumb anything down.
Right.
That's to say that when you communicate with other members of a community, you use the language of that community. And so for me, I think Lanier just explained that very well. When there's built-in trust to being a member, and when you have that, a lot of things become easier.
And I want to just, tag
Yeah.
right on that being a member, because many, and I'm going to use the people of color tagline, right? Because it mixes, but everyone experiences life differently. And Black people and brown people experience life very differently. So we need to value lived experience. There's a reason why Lanier can walk into Baltimore, whether or not he's from Baltimore.
Mhm.
It's not just because he's a Black man in America. That means he has a lived experience that other people recognize. You know what they say, right? Game recognize game. We know what game you got to play, what game we got to play. We know that we're all out here being told it's a football game, arrive and it's a soccer game, right? Like that right there, the idea of valuing lived experiences.
Mhm.
The economic development industry is not a very diverse industry. I know. I go to the conferences, I talk to the leadership, and they are often very, very much a monolith, right?
Yeah.
And then you look at the program people, and it's, the leadership are white men, the program people are white women. You don't see a lot of diversity in economic development in our organizations, right? So I really want to emphasize that in order to build trust, there is something that goes along with not just being a part of the community, but having that shared lived experience. And sometimes, even culturally, you make those connections, as I have done in Asian communities,
Mhm.
is because you spent the time.
Right.
Lanier said, right? Like, time equals trust, trust equals change. And if you really are talking about spending the time, something isn't transparent, somebody's going to say to you the next time you come around, hey, you told me this and it looks completely different. What's up with that? And you're going to be able to say, spending time in building that trust, this is actually how it goes down. This is what that really means. And this is why it looks this way in front of you, but behind you, this is what happened. So spending that time and valuing life experiences of people of color, recognizing that it's not just the diversity voice at the table,
Right.
but it's the only way that change is going to happen. We need bridges, and that's who we are. We are bridges to communities, and you have to value your bridges or you'll never get there.
Ooh, let me just one thing I gotta say, because that's the
Yeah.
word.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
If these gray hairs and my beard could talk, um, you know, uh, now and shout out to Ronald Isley giving us gray hair brothers some
Come back. Come back. Y'all gotta come back.
Exactly. But you know, if my gray hair could talk, they would say, remember when you used to lead with yourself
Mm,
and your message didn't resonate as much. Now I lead with others.
mhm,
You know, when I'm on, I'm going to put somebody else on. And when you do that, I don't care if you're in Baltimore,
mhm.
Birmingham, Wilmington, what you put somebody else on, you're always welcome. And it's when you don't, it's when you go up there, you got all the great ideas, you're gonna solve it, and you might, I mean, you might be of the same hue as other people, but you know, you got to represent others at some point.
Yeah.
And when you do that right, oh my goodness, you'll be invited in, you'll be given dinner, drinks, you know, I mean, the whole thing.
Yes.
Contracts, the whole thing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to,
Clothing.
Opportunities.
You are family.
Favor.
That's what
Favor comes.
inclusive
Favor
is.
comes.
That's inclusive, right?
Yeah.
That's inclusive economic development,
Yeah.
inclusive growth. That's exactly it.
So, Andre, your statement kind of shifted from off of my questions because I have to address this and I want to hear you guys' opinion on this. And Samara, I have something I got to get back to you on. So you guys have me all over the place, but I'm mad excited. So when you talk about putting others on, between how we are as a culture to what we're seeing online through social media, there are major pushes for people to focus on themselves, like fulfill your purpose, go after your dream, chase your, you know, it's a lot of meism. And inside of that meism, tying it into building generational wealth and building wealth for your family, the problem comes that we have people inside of households that are chasing their own vision and dream and goal and leaving even their own family behind, right? So now you have in our culture, if someone wants to be an accountant or a bookkeeper or a credit repair person, they see it as I have a business versus this is a family business. Other ethnic groups say they have a family business, and everyone is bought into that business. Everyone plays a role in that business. Where our culture, I have a business and then here's my family. And what I've noticed is what this does is it's two things that kind of happen. It can cause division in the family because as an entrepreneur, there are things that happen that cause you to not have money to pay for things. And so the family's riding the entrepreneurship roller coaster with you, but they haven't bought into what exactly this is and how it's beneficial for our family. Then you have the other part of your children not being exposed to other opportunities. So you're wondering why your child just wants to be an athlete and a rapper. Well, you have a whole business entity that they could be a part of, whether it's, you know, doing data research for you or whether it's, you know, stuffing envelopes. But how do we get our people to understand that business creation is building wealth? The greatest part of that wealth is the knowledge from running the business, and get your family into this so that it can be a holistic wealth building, legacy building opportunity. How do we change our community's mindsets around that?
And whatever you say, I've got something to add to this, Andre. So go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it. Yeah,
well,
yeah,
no,
go
go
for
ahead.
it.
No, you go.
So I want to. The reason why I say I want to add is I want to just preview one thing. So, well, we're in early stage of sort of branding something called hashtag WOT. What hashtag? What we own this.
Okay.
And the we is a bigger we. It's not. Let's assume the four of us own the business, or own an asset.
Yeah.
What we are trying to sort of create as an ethos is the we own this. It's just not the four of us, but it's our kids,
Yeah.
it's our family. It's, you know, man, I went to school with, you know, Andre, and you know, we own this, right?
Yes.
And so this real concept of, you know, can we build a pride of ownership that then gets all of those messages, you know, communicated. When I grew up, my father owned a bar. We cleaned up the parking lot. We stocked the beer coolers. You know, that was just, we DJ'd if the DJ didn't show up.
Yeah.
You know, even at age 16 or whatever, right? We figured out how to be a part of that.
Yeah.
I have another little story where we were walking down the street with my nephew, and they had opened a little account at a black-owned bank, Harvard Bank, and they put, you know, $1,000 in, $100 in. And the nephew, even at 8 years old, said, you know, I own that bank, right? So that thought of we having equity stake and connection, and then getting the business lessons, what it means to see other people of color own, and run and manage and contract with other businesses and lease to other businesses and hire professional service providers. I just think there's a moment now, right? Moment movement. There's a moment now where this collective we, I think can mean more than just I own a business, you own a business, the four of us own a business. Yeah, I'm hoping that you can really build some ethos around this, collective we.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, but I want to just make sure that we don't conflate American culture with Black culture. Black culture has always been more about the collective. When you look at, we give more money away, more of our money than any other group.
That's good.
We live together more than any other group, intergenerational housing. So we have to. Why you see, but you see this in American culture.
Yeah.
Me. Look at me. That's just American culture. Where it differs is that Black people don't have wealth. And when you don't have wealth, you're going to have more sole proprietorships. You're going to have more individual efforts. And that's what you see. I mean, you don't see, and also businesses, businesses are structured in that way. It's a lot easier to get an individual LLC and go about that route. We don't have really a lot of cooperative models, as Lanier described, that we're very familiar with, but we need it. Actually, Black culture fits more with a cooperative model than sort of an individual contracting regime. So for me, it's always, we are part of American culture. Don't ever get that twisted. But when you have wealth, when you don't have wealth, what it looks like is, look at this, modicum of value, this little bit of whatever I have something. But in reality, we're all striving for that protection. One more thing is that there is a deep selfishness with racism. There has been wealth hoarding. Like you don't get a Bezos. You don't get a Gates without extreme exploitation, selfishness. So we can't even come close to that. But what I do always worry about with Black folk, Latinos, Asian folk, that we're not Eurocentric. But you stay in America long enough, you will start to reflect that sort of ethos of America, which is very individualistic. And so I just wanted to make sure that that's an American value.
Thank you for sharing that.
And I just want to jump in and call out a Kwanzaa principle since we're here, right? Like this is something African Americans came up with, right? Literally created not less than 40 years ago, right? The third principle, Ujamaa, is cooperative economics. Literally teaching cooperative economics. This is something that we do value. And, I'll say when your wealth is in your people and when your wealth is in your knowledge and your own personal ingenuity, and it's not in the bank, you become much more interdependent. So I would say that, again, it's the opportunity and the fair play that kind of steps on, kind of crushes the idea that we can even build something that big. Because I know the folks at the hair salon, at the barbershop, the folks at the caterer, their kids are working. Their kids are working, like as Lanier mentioned about his upbringing. The entrepreneurs I know and their families are working. Now, can you trust your second cousin or even your first cousin to do everything? No, not always, but that's across the board. That's not
Yeah.
a Black issue. I would say that our businesses of color, specifically Black owned and Latinx owned, are very interdependent. And that's a survival thing. And I think it's a heart and soul thing. I
Yeah.
think in contradiction to American values of individualism, we have cultural values of community. That's
Mhm.
our word. You
Yeah.
know, I recognize that, America uses that, but community, we've been talking about community and our people and our hood, like that's been us and it still is us. I just think the opportunities are
And
lacking for
Yeah.
us to propel that
and you know what Auntie Cook Gaines and Uncle Richardson represent?
all
Mhm.
day.
They represent Rosewood. They represent Black Wall Street.
Mhm.
They represent Richmond. They represent 17th Street in Birmingham. You know, we've always found ways to do the collective. But
Together.
Yeah,
guess what
and let
always
me and
happens?
let me be clear, Andre. I'm Auntie Mira and I'm TT Mira.
Yes.
That's
Like
right.
like that's where my community comes in.
Yes.
I'm
That's right.
I'm TT Mira just like I'm Auntie Mira. Like, and it's been that way. And it's been that way. So I do think, again, we've had it. We've got the history. Andre, you're listing our folks, right?
Mhm.
The issue is the opportunity to actually scale,
Yeah.
make
Okay.
our businesses as big as the others. It's
Okay.
just not there. It's the systemic barriers, right? And
Mhm.
then it's the general bias. It's the you walked in not looking like what I needed you to look like.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask one more question to Samira, and then I'm going to check in with the chat to see if we have anything, and then I'll double back to my questions because I can talk to you all for days. So going back to what you mentioned about the shared living experience and about the bridge. So as a single mom raising 4 kids, having to navigate that process of being on every type of public assistance to transitioning to being fully self-sufficient, right? When you're working with your clients, there is that gap of, if I make too much, I'm going to lose this benefit. Is it worth it? If I don't make enough, I can keep my medical insurance. So can you just share with the viewers, and I'm hoping that there are some politicians and people that make decisions on here to hear your strategies, but what are some of the techniques, strategies, or processes that you help your participants navigate to get over the bridge all the way enough to where it's not detrimental to them, like having to lose childcare or having to lose, food stamps in the process? Like, what does that look like?
So, and thank you for that, because it's it's a reality. It is a reality. There are folks who can't make one more dollar
Yeah,
without losing,
everything.
right, without losing, food stamp credits,
Mhm.
right? So what I really recommend is, and this is practitioner experience, we start training businesses and providing TA, and we talk about things like break even analysis. There is so much more to a break even, right?
Yes.
So when we're talking about breaking even, we're not talking about what you spent versus what you gained. We're
Mhm.
talking about the entire picture here. So, for example, I had a conversation with a woman who was a cleaner, and she got kind of a bigger contract.
Okay.
She said, "Now, if I take this contract, the child care credits that I have, and then my baby is with me and I can't go do the contract. So, what do we do now?"
Mhm.
Just those conversations there of, we actually planned for this. I said, okay, well, let's go through the network. Let's go through the childcare network. Who
Mhm.
can you pay that's the same amount that you pay to this childcare or less, who can take care of this child? We strategize beyond the business. And, my experience is with women entrepreneurs. Women are I spend a lot of time with that piece right there. So women are the caregivers of our world, right?
Mhm.
Even if you don't have your own kids, you're taking care of somebody else's, you're taking care of parents, you're taking care of partners. next door neighbors' dogs. I mean, you feeding walking dogs that don't belong to you. My own experiences. No, I don't have a dog. Let me just be clear. Why am I walking this dog? Well, listen, somebody need help. So for me, I really do think it's planning that goes beyond kind of this traditional. And again, when you think about American culture, there's this traditional, here are the 5 steps of your business plan. Here are the, when you think about a business that happens for a woman, for example, you have to talk to her about everything that first stands in the way of this new opportunity. And if you don't solve for that first, for that over there and that over there first, you can't even talk about the opportunity. So for me, it really is, I mean, I can't tell you the level of life coaching and organizing and planning that I have done just to say, go ahead and apply for this contract. Go ahead and, do this marketing. You got to solve for the life challenges first. And the life challenges are the same, there's 4 big categories, right? Transportation, childcare, food, right? And then utilities. Like those are the 4 things that I constantly have to solve for, right? Is the phone even going to be on to get the call? Can you feed these kids? Can you feed yourself? Can you get there? Transportation. All of those 4 major things need to be solved for before you can even talk to an entrepreneur about an opportunity. You have to be able to realistically execute on the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for breaking that down. I think that especially as a business consultant, I always say 10% of what I do is the strategy in the business. 90% is everything that you just said. It really becomes ministry in a sense.
Exactly.
The inner man and then all of the other barriers. And then we're going to get to the strategy because the strategy works regardless.
Right. Exactly.
But thank you for sharing your insight with actually taking groups of people through that process. Because even in employment, employers don't understand that type of barrier to saying yes to an opportunity. And it's like, hey, we offered you a better job and you declined. And it's like, the opportunity wasn't enough to get me over the threshold. So it looks like an awesome opportunity to you, but it would set me back traumatically.
Right. Correct. That break even goes well beyond what you account for in the financial statement. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to check in with Tish. Tish, are you there? Do we have questions in the chat?
We do.
Awesome.
The first question is, how do we also serve those sectors of the community to ensure that growth is not exclusive to white-collar businesses? Could you hear me?
Yes. I mean, let me take a little bit of that, and I say this all the time, and why I'm actually very high on this Biden's jobs plan infrastructure bill is because he's explicitly stating that 40% of this what is it, $3 trillion infrastructure bill will be directed to communities that have been historically disenfranchised. Now, that's not the point. If we can figure out ways to direct capital to actual people, so to the potential homeowner, to the business owner, Black business owner, to the other folks, and not just directed to brick and mortar. Because you invest in brick and mortar, guess what happens? Property values increase, people are pushed out. And so with this plan, we need to demand that there's regulations that it will actually go to people in those communities. And if you do that, then we're much more likely to have more owners. And if you have more owners, you have more people who are essentially more shareholders in the development in a community. And so for me, it's about figuring out ways to direct capital to actual people in the hood who happen to be Black, brown, or Asian in the hood.
So can I just add something to that, especially because to address with Wilmington. Everything you just said is awesome, Andre. And then the other thing I would just say to add to that for our Wilmington people that are watching, some things that we need to focus on is making sure that when those funds are available to people, that the information is getting out to our community. What happens here in Wilmington is that Black and brown businesses find out late or like the day before or the week after. And so organizations like Wilmington Alliance, on the Wind Factory, we're really trying to make sure that we're getting that information out to the masses as swiftly as possible and empowering people to be able to apply. But for those of you that are on here, the only way that's going to happen is if we make the commitment, you as an attendee of this event, to push this information to people that you know. So when Renata sends out emails, making sure that it's getting to the people that it needs to get to, so that we can take advantage and be in a position to apply in a timely fashion.
And I'll say for the organizations and organization leaders who are already on this call, I'm going to go back to those bridge people.
Yeah.
Find somebody in that community who is the networker, who is the wheel for the spokes. Find somebody. How are you going to find somebody? You got to get on the street. You got to get out there. You got to say, hey, introduce me to. You got to ask the question. It's sales 101, right? Like after you close a sale, you say, do you have anybody else you think I should be talking to? Right? So you go ahead and find that bridge, because once you give that message to that person, they're not going to hold it. They're going to pass it around, and they'll recognize the importance of that role and that position. I'll also say I've had some really great conversations with Renata around informal entrepreneurship, the gray market, right? Informal entrepreneurship is you don't have a business license. That does not mean you have not been in business for 15 years. It means you don't have a business license. The woman I bought my prom dress from, she works out of her house. Okay. The stylist that I went to all through college, she worked out of her house. So this idea of informal entrepreneurship and what we think as credible businesses becomes a brand new barrier. So for me, especially around these policies, et cetera, that are coming out, PPP was like, a complete debacle that showed us this, right? Do we have to have a business license? Some of these things that we always assume we need, we don't. We're just following practices that were, standardized practice. So please submit your business license in order for this local grant. Well, here's my question. Do you really need a business license? Do you? Or do you need a receipt that it was used for a business, activity or a business purchase? Do you need a business license, really? If you are serious about serving businesses that aren't these, established folks, you need to take away the barriers that are specifically set up for those people and not these people. If it's about business is, for me, are you making a sale? Are you making a sale? You are in business. Let's not talk about whether or not you're formal or informal just yet, but let's talk about you being in business. You have a product or a service and somebody pays you for it, you're in business. So we can move from there.
Right. That was good. Tish?
How do we boldly change how we do economic development?
So, I love that question. I think there's a focus right now on the money, right, and on capital. And we've seen this on a macro basis, even as it related to, I think it became clear to me that there was a change happening when, the Amazon was making its location decision, right? That people start saying, well, look, why would we provide incentive to Amazon and we don't provide incentive to our local restaurant down the street that wants to open a second location, right? And so my sense is, that empowered folks in economic development to just think different. Like, all right, you know what, if we're investing in local ownership, what role how could we use the capital that we have available as an economic development organization, or how can we use our platform to advocate for additional capital to support more local, inclusive economic development and economic growth initiative? How do we make the case for capital? And I think right now, with these macro investments being announced, JP Morgan Chase and Nike and Facebook and everyone sort of announcing small business support, sort of capital. I think there's an opportunity for our economic development officials as well as philanthropy. Philanthropy, I believe, is changing and has really, it almost needs to be applauded for saying, we want to do something, so give us innovative ideas, we're taking risks. So now that there's capital there, it's incumbent upon us as economic development officials, community development leaders, and entrepreneurs to sort of make the request, to think about it differently, to say, all right, I know we've never done it like this. We've never given an entrepreneur a $50,000 grant. I know we've never given an existing business. We figured out how to do facade, sort of grants and loans, but we've never given a business additional capital. If they invest, we invest. That seems like private inurement or, unjust enrichment for an entrepreneur. But if we do it for the macro companies, why can't we do it for entrepreneurs and existing business owners and startups in our existing community? It's time to be bold in the ask of capital. That's my recommendation.
For most economic development organizations, they're not about development. They're about boosting organizations and recruiting them to a community. They're not about development. In addition, most economic development organizations have been an arm of racist hierarchy in cities. And so when you have essentially a cheerleader that's a booster for a biased chamber or something like that, you're going to get what you get. You're gonna, and so going to, double downing on Lanier's point, if you have authentic economic development organizations and professionals, you're going to seek to develop talent in areas that I do a lot of work on identifying underappreciated assets, meaning if you just add water, it will grow. And so a true development person can identify where the true growth potential is. And many cities, it's in Black firms in Black communities.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you can see incredible growth. And so we really do need to be critical that economic development for the most part hasn't been about development. It's been about cheerleading and recruiting firms into a city and essentially being the arm of a power structure that has not wanted Black people in the community itself. So I'm very critical of economic development because a lot of these organizations, a lot of the people are not about Black people at all. I mean, never was, haven't been. And so we really do need to be critical. What are you doing as a organization? And one other thing, we do need new economic development organizations. We are not represented for the most part by the major economic development groups in cities. And so they are representing white business leaders for the most part. I mean, there are exceptions here and there, but we need new organizations that are focused on directing capital to develop firms. And so, yeah, I'll leave it there.
I just want to, we had a question on our list that ties into this that, Tish, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask because we really need to get this answer. And it probably is off of what Andre just ended with. But all three of you, what are some suggestions, knowing where Wilmington is in this process, in your experience? What are some suggestions that you could give local government to support entrepreneurs and this economic development process?
The first thing I'm going to say is pay for education.
Okay.
Pay for it. Pay for it. I absolutely believe in skin in the game, and an entrepreneur should give a little in order to feel like they belong there. That is important. So I'm not throwing that away at all. But when you're looking for quality people in the community, I talk about the Community Business Academy through Rising Tide.
Mhm.
That Community Business Academy is a licensed, proven program. We're talking about a program that works through impact evaluation, like reduction in need for public assistance.
Yeah.
A 60% reduction in need for public assistance. Y'all got people on public assistance? Here's a solution that can work, right? And again, we're talking about getting past that break even. The problem is you have to really think about business education holistically. It's not always going to be a midday activity. And sometimes if it is, and this is what I learned founding the DC Women's Business Center, if it's going to be a 6 to 9, 3-hour, weekly meeting, you are not only going to feed those people, you're also going to have a homework center. You're also going to feed those children.
Yeah.
All of that has to happen. In downtown DC, the meters start being free, right, at 6:30. So recognize that there are going to be some people in that class that don't walk in the door until 6:35 because they're waiting for the free meters.
That's good.
Right? And daycare pickup starts at 4:45.
Mm-hmm.
And for every minute you're late, there's $1, or
Mm-hmm.
call it whatever you want to do in that business model. Those are the types of things that I think we need to be serious about. We have to pay for business education of our entrepreneurs. We've missed so much in a very intentional way. The knowledge has been kept. The knowledge has been hoarded. Education is an asset, and there has been asset hoarding. My brothers Lanier and Andre just said that. So in order to really make that change, I really think that we need to invest in that business education. I'm going to now pass it over to Lanier to talk about the capital.
The money. But you know it. You must have heard it's about the money. So
Yeah.
I for the last 7 years, I lead the Rutgers Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development. We've helped over 500 entrepreneurs, 70% are entrepreneurs of color, 50% are women. Right? Here's what I started to feel like a couple years ago, that the capacity building work we did without capital was sort of like workforce development without a job, right? So clearly we got to continue to do capacity building and entrepreneurship education. But what I know is true is that first 25, 50, even $100,000 of capital, patient, flexible equity capital, to the extent that can be provided by government or philanthropy, any of that is necessary, or private sector. We formed our angel fund just because we were like, look, they're promising companies, but we need people to get that first $25,000 or $50,000 of capital so they can get some customer validation, get their product done, somehow get their idea implemented. That's a role that I think local government and local economic development, if it just changed this frame of reference, say, all right, Chicago Community Trust in Chicago is doing it now. They're doing up to $100,000 of just pre-development grants. To private sector as well, right?
I want to lean on grants.
Right.
I just want to lean on pre-development grants.
Right.
And I keep saying like that,
right?
It's not more debt. It's not more debt. And so that's the systemic change that I think local economic development organizations could say, what have we put together? Pick whatever the number is. I don't know what number is large or not. $1 million, $10 million, something that says we're going to invest in our local entrepreneurs. We're going to create a structure where we can hear ideas, and and make some investment, make some bets on people that we think have a high probability of success. And it doesn't mean they have to be growth, the next, unicorns or zebras or whatever you want to call it. It is, can we help people, be able to create enterprises that, A, can employ themselves, but then B, can start to employ other people in our community? Can we help our existing, businesses expand, open a new location, add a vehicle or drive-through or different, online platform? That's something local economic development, government, and philanthropy can do today. And
Yeah.
it just takes force of will and and willingness, right?
Yeah. And the answer to this question, because this is what I've gotten a lot of pushback on around grants, Lanier, and just paying for actual business education is, well, what's the return on the investment, right? This idea that someone is actually throwing money away if they're supporting, right, Black-owned businesses or businesses of low wealth entrepreneurs, that these entrepreneurs don't know what to do with the money. These entrepreneurs don't deserve the money.
Here's something I really wish we can do. I know we don't have time, but it's one of those things I love to work on something like this with Andre. Like when you think about all of the other ROI measures, right? I read once that it costs $70,000 a year to incarcerate a person. So I always thought, if I just drew a circle around the little project I'm working on, and if last year 10 people were incarcerated in that circle, and this year, 8 people were incarcerated, that's $140,000 economic impact. That doesn't show up in my model, right? More people going to finishing high school, going to college in that circle. It doesn't show up in our model, right? 3 other people opening businesses as a result of the traffic that we've created on this corridor. That sort of return of investment if that can get communicated and incorporated into our return on investment analysis, I think to use Tamara's earlier point, it gives us another data point about economic return. That's not just about, the 5 or 6 or 8% or 18% sort of, direct financial return on investments, right? There are all of these other investments we got to figure out how to do.
That would be powerful.
Can I just add a few more things? Because and Lanier brought up a great point, because we actually, when we look at inclusive activity, we actually see that as risk. And when you're talking about capital, getting capital, it's like investors see anything in inclusion as risk, when actually we should be reducing the risk when we're reducing interest rates when we're lending in specific areas with specific causes like that, because you're actually improving the community, you're improving the capacity of the community. But there are some like concrete ways cities, and particularly in this time, they really have to look at supplier diversity. Remember, one of the tragedies that the federal government, and not necessarily city level, did during COVID, they eliminated their affirmative action policies on contracts for Black, Brown, and Asian businesses. And so they said, we're going to eliminate this for a period. And that was the exact opposite thing you should do. You should double down, because this is the moment you're seeing trillions of dollars being poured out the door. This is really the only time you can build or see this kind of wealth transfer. In addition, cities have to have a targeted effort to convert sole proprietorships into employer businesses, so they can participate as suppliers for in various projects. And they can help do that by creating various zones and initiatives where they're directing capital in the way that Lanier suggested. And so cities have a lot of room they could do. And let's not forget, Wilmington and other municipalities, they should use their community development block grants. There's a lot of flexibility there. They can actually invest directly into businesses with those funds if they choose to. And so for me, cities are an important vehicle for directing capital, creating customer base, doing so many different things, providing real estate for Black, Brown led businesses. So there's a lot of things cities can do to improve the situation.
And I just want to put a bright highlight under supplier diversity. And you know, at the DC Women's Business Center, when someone asked me, well, what did you do there? What was, you know, the best thing that you learned? I say, well, I learned how to make millionaires.
Mhm.
And they say, well, how'd you do that? Supplier diversity is how we did that.
Yeah.
That's how we did that. I mean, again, DC is the seat of government. So feds, of which, you know, at the time you could actually walk into a supplier diversity office, which is difficult in different areas, but the feds and the local government, that's how we did it. Supplier diversity is how we made millionaires. And only 2%, barely 2% of women-owned businesses even hit the $1 million revenue mark. The fact that we had 4% of our businesses over $1 million in revenue, we obviously were doing something special, which was not. It was all through procurement, supplier diversity. And I'm going to go beyond government, and I'm going to say government, your anchor institutions, right? Those colleges, those universities, those hospital centers, all of those anchor institutions should also be, you know, a part of this supplier diversity solution because, you know, as Lanier mentioned, right, workforce without a job.
Yeah.
So you're trained, you get your capital, now you need your opportunity.
Thank you guys. This was awesome and extremely powerful. Tish, do you have, I think we have time for one more question.
Okay, I have one more, and I think this one, Dr. Perry should start.
Okay.
As we begin to identify underappreciated assets and opportunities for growth, how can we push political and business leaders to shift their ideas around what community development looks like? And then to take that a step further, how do we begin to educate community members that there are assets in their neighborhoods that can be used to build wealth for them versus building wealth for investors?
You know what? I was going to say, make sure you get a copy of Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in American Life. But I will say this, my work has become a lot easier because people hit the streets. And people said, you know, enough is enough. And we're going to vote. We're going to get the people who will create the kind of action that we need. And we're going to demand it. You know, the reason why I named the book Know Your Price, my favorite play in the whole wide world is Two Trains Running by August Wilson. And in the play, the main character, Memphis, is about to have his property seized through eminent domain. And the main character, Memphis, goes, no, I'm not selling my property for $15,000. I know my price. I got my price. I'm paraphrasing, but it's a refrain throughout the play. There's another character, Hambone, who agrees to paint a fence for a proprietor in exchange for a ham. He paints the fence. He never gets his ham. And throughout the play, he goes, give me my ham, give me my ham. And we don't know if he had mental illness before he painted the fence, but he eventually goes crazy and dies. But there was actually a happy ending. The main character, Memphis, gets $35,000 for his property, well above the original ask, and it's assumed he's getting the white rate or the market rate. Now, the moral of the story here is know that you have worth. What I try to do with my research is give the people the price to stand on, even if it means going crazy and dying. A lot of what we're talking about is about demanding our value in any way we can. If it's voting, if it's writing letters, if it's going to city council meetings, if it's hitting the streets, at some point we got to demand our proper value.
This was awesome. Thank you guys so much. And when I opened up, I really want to thank you for your dedication, making this your life work. I know that, you know, there are sacrifices that are made when you decide to, you know, focus on a community and do everything that you can to build it. So I just want to publicly thank you from our community for your dedication and fulfilling your life's work. At this time, I believe Renata's going to come up and close us out. If you're on here, you're from Wilmington, thank you guys for joining us. And I really hope that you are stirred up. I really hope that you guys are stirred up and ready to take the notes that you did take and the inspiration and the insight, and more importantly, the exact steps that were given to help us come together and begin to implement these things. Because I really, like I said before, this is the perfect time for Wilmington. It cannot go another day. Like, the time is now. And so I'm waiting for Renata to come up.
Thank you to our national speakers and our moderator for this lively Q&A and participation in our 2021 Yes Wilmington Summit. This event could not happen without hard work of a small yet mighty team working behind the scenes. Thank you to Emily, Jen, and Tish for all your hard work. And thank you to Chris Bruce and the entire team of King Creative. I hope we are all walking away with tangible solutions and fire in our bellies to make them reality. I know I am. To quote Lanier Richardson, this is the moment of action, without apology. We are strong, Wilmington strong. Thank you.